What up, guys? Thanks for joining us today on the podcast. Eugene and I are going to be getting into the ideas on no time limit matches and basically sort of comparing those to point-based tournaments. And then, as always, we get into all kinds of side tangents and stuff like that. But again, thank you guys for joining us this week on the podcast. And a big thanks to our sponsors for helping make this podcast happen. Charlotte's Web. Again, it's part of my daily recovery routine from training, from all the lifting, jiu-jitsu. I've been doing some hill sprints recently. I don't like running a lot, but I'll do some sprints in my grass in the backyard. Yeah. And it's easier on my knees. You know,
I think running uphill is actually easier on your knees.
Yeah,
it does give you a really, really solid burn.
Oh yeah,
it's good.
Well, so like for instance, this past Sunday, I went and did like a 30-minute walk. When I woke up that morning, I had chugged a bunch of water, 30-minute walk, got done, went back into the backyard. And then we've got a pretty steep hill. I ran my hill and then did a 40-yard burst. So it was like a hill sprint up to a 40-yard burst. And I did about 10 of those, and I got a nice little something going. And then I stopped, just chilled out, got my heart rate going. It's like, all right, feel good. And then I went and had breakfast. And it was a delicious breakfast afterwards because I got nice sweat in the morning.
Yeah.
But again, the thing that I use, that thing that I really think makes a difference as far as my supplements go, is CBD. I think it's a great tool to have into the mix. And again, don't let me sell it for you. I encourage you to try it out for yourself and see what kind of effects you have on it. I notice a difference. A lot of people that I give samples to in the gym notice a difference. But again, it does take a little bit to kind of kick in. So I encourage you to try it for about a month, see what you think, make your own decision as to whether or not you really like it. And if you decide to try it out, use the promo code Jiu-Jitsu20 at check out at charlesweb.com. And again, sometimes when I say things really fast, it may not sound like it, but it's Jiu-Jitsu20 to get 20% off. Sometimes when I say Jiu-Jitsu really fast, it can be like, is he saying Jiu-Jitsu or Jiu-Jitsu? Because they're almost, the sounds is almost identical. So CHEWJITSU 20. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Epic Roll. It is a jiu-jitsu company that's owned by a jiu-jitsu black belt who makes gear, merchandise, gis, apparel for jiu-jitsu practitioners. And again, I like supporting a jiu-jitsu owned company that's owned by an actual black belt that's within our community. And he makes really good stuff. Again, I love his no-gi stuff. And if you ever see me on my Instagram or my YouTube wearing a rash guard or a set of shorts that have my logo on it, or if you see me wearing some random kind of cool jiu-jitsu shirt that's not one of my shirts, it's probably his stuff. And again, if you want to check out any of his stuff, you can do so by going to epicrollbjj.com. The promo code is jiu-jitsu for 15% off on the order, and you can get yourself some high quality jiu-jitsu gear. Also, guys, if you want to support the podcast directly, if you enjoy the podcast and you'd like to keep it going, you can do so by going to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. In there, we have a membership area where you can subscribe and you get access to exclusive content. The bulk of the content is usually an actionable tip that has been given to us from all the guests that we've had on the podcast. And so each one of them gives us a little gem for training that you can implement for yourself, some idea that could be useful to you. And then we also have a lot of other content that we haven't released, which is a lot of times Eugene and I talking about different ideas. And so if you like the podcast content and you'd like more of it to keep you entertained or interested, you can do so by going to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast and get access to that. It's 3+ years of content basically built up for you. And if you would like to subscribe to my email newsletter, get exclusive discounts on products and things like that I have going on, be the first one to have the first dibs on the products that I have going on. Because a lot of times, a lot of the stuff that I do never makes it to the light of day because it'll be limited. And my email newsletter group, they're the ones that get first crack at it. Anytime we do camps and stuff like that, they get first grabs at all that stuff and get 3 free Jiu-Jitsu ebooks to help you out with your game. You can do so by going to chewjitsu.net/join, JOIN. When you go to that website address, you can sign up using your email. I'll send you a form to your email. You basically confirm it, then you'll get emails from me on a daily basis, almost daily. And if you don't like them, you can always unsubscribe and keep those ebooks for yourself. And so, guys, let's jump into this podcast and talk about no time limit matches in Jiu-Jitsu. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because recently, Who's Number One has done, a couple of events, and they've had some really long matches. Now, most recently, there was the Who's Number One where, well, first off, just a few weeks ago, they did the Who's Number One finale, and they had Isaac Mitchell and Kyle
Chambers.
Kyle Chambers. Yeah, Kyle Chambers match. And, those are two tough grapplers. And I think, again, I'll say the same thing in just a second. I think that match would have made a great 15-minute match, 10, 15-minute match. It would have been interesting to see, like, because those dudes went for a long time, an hour long or whatever. It would have been interesting to see, with that much energy in them, what does it look like in 15 minutes? What does it look like in 10 minutes? Because again, what you're doing is a competitor, you're pacing yourself. You know that this is your time limit.
Yeah.
And so you're going to try to, it's like basically imagine lifting weights. If you've got to do 12 reps, okay, well, then if you pick up the weight and it's super heavy, you're like, oh, this is too heavy. I need to lighten it up a little bit. You kind of judge, well, what's the right weight for me? And so when you're a competitor getting ready to compete, you look at no time limit and you go, okay, well, I've got to pace myself because this thing could go a long time. Whereas if it's 10 minutes, you're like, well, I just got to go for 10 minutes. I can push myself for 10 minutes, or whatever the time limit is. And then recently we had the one with Felipe Pena and Gordon Ryan. And again, there was some controversy, whatever, but the fight, the match ended around like 45 minutes.
Yeah, like 40, 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Like that.
And I mean, again, it was one of these things where in both cases with those no time limit matches, I had to like stop watching them. I went to sleep, and I wanted to see the winner. I had enjoyed the shorter time limit matches leading up to it a lot. I thought there was, like, for instance, the Who's Number One this past weekend with the Gordon Felipe headliner fight. I mean, there were some fun matches, and you got to see some good jiu-jitsu on display, and I enjoyed it. I was enjoying the matches. I was engaged and everything else. And then it got to that one, and it was just like, oh no, because first off, the match was very competitive. I think it was far more competitive than people gave it credit for being. And then you saw that the match kind of set a pace where like basically they would just kind of go back and forth, Felipe would eventually come up, Gordon would sweep him, and then Felipe would come up on top, and they would just go kind of back and forth. And it was just, okay, like, this is what we're doing. Around the 25-minute mark, I verbally tapped. I was like, I looked at Jess. I was like, I'm going to sleep. It's like 12:30.
It was Monday morning.
Well, it was well, yeah, technically Monday morning, Sunday in the evening, Monday morning. I was like, I'm done. I got to go get some sleep.
And I think they started like an hour and a half late or something, because I think the prelim was supposed to start on YouTube at like 7:30. It was like 9 o'clock before they started. So that was a little bit of a problem too. I mean, because I was like, well, wasn't this thing supposed to be on already? So I think that kind of, it took away a little bit from that.
But but the Isaac Mitchell and Kyle Chambers match, they were going like at 12 o'clock our time. Yeah. Because I was like, man, this is late. I gotta go to sleep.
It is, and it changes up. Like, obviously, let's look at strategy wise. Like, I mean, you approach that, you're like, well, I know I'm going against a tough opponent, and I have to. I don't want to gas out. I think one of the worst things to happen is like to get fatigued on the mats.
Oh, it's terrible.
To run out of cardio.
If you've ever had it before in a match, it's awful.
It's like one of those things where it's like we're having like all the power goes out. Like, we're losing this, we're losing power here, and then like when you get tired, the other things happen, other things suffer. Mentally start to suffer, right? Well, all right, you may want to weigh out. You may want to like, I don't have much left, or you start doubting yourself and things like that. But I think like you don't want to get tired on the mat, so you pace yourself. So I think for someone that's like you had mentioned, all right, the match is like really long. We've been watching this thing for a while. You don't know when it's gonna. You don't have really an ending in sight. It could be any minute. It could be in 20 minutes, 30 minutes. So I think it kind of, for the audience wise, it can be a little bit not as enticing.
Yeah.
Not as exciting.
And I mean, I'm a fan of jiu-jitsu.
100%.
So like, it's not like I'm a casual fan. I'm not like a person that like just wants to see someone get submitted. Like, I appreciate the nuance of things that are happening. But again, to me, it's like, and this is something I've said this for a long time. I think that you do better when you make matches shorter. One, from a pure spectator standpoint, it's easier to watch. It's easier to watch something that's a little shorter because, one, you're gonna condense that down, and there's gonna be more action. There's gonna be more engagement going on because they can go, right? Because you're basically shortening that time frame down, and you force people to go. And then also with the no time limit, are we really judging whose jiu-jitsu is better? Or is it basically like, are we judging who's jiu-jitsu better, or are we saying like you got better cardio, who you're in better condition? It's like, it's kind of hard to say because it's like, it's like, why is it, because I know that like back in the day, that's like a lot of the Gracies would be like, this is how you decide, no time limit matches, right? I mean, there was a famous fight. Here's a great example. Kazushi Sakuraba versus Royce Gracie back in the day. That was a big fight.
Yeah.
I think it was 2000. I remember my buddy had like satellite TV or whatever, and we ordered that.
It's Pride, would it? Pride fighting.
It was Pride Grand Prix. I fell asleep. I kept falling asleep. Like, because these guys are fighting, they're in an MMA fight, and it was just endless rounds. And it would be in the middle of the fight, and like, they would kind of do something, and they were just sitting there, and like they would hold position, not really do anything, because you don't know what the hell's going to happen. It's hard to finish people up. I remember there was one point where like Sakuraba was like, he was like leaning out of the ropes, and like Royce was like holding, and he's like pushing him, and like he's just leaning out of the ropes, and he's looking at the camera, kind of like going, okay, here we are, and then they kept going. Eventually they threw in the towel for Royce, and Sakuraba won. But I mean, like, I remember someone made a highlight of the video of that fight, and it was so funny because the highlight video was like 2 minutes long, and it showed all the action. You're like, but the fight was like an hour plus long. You're like, so really you had 2 minutes worth watching of an hour long fight. And, I'm just dozing off. And I think that, again, when you're talking about a sport, we're first off, we're not talking, I mean, first off, from a fight standpoint, like, yeah, there's no time limit on the streets or something, true. But also in the streets, you're probably not going to be fighting, and no time limit, because that's not how it works, unless you just want to start saying, just go fight, right? Just start fighting each other.
Yeah.
But from a standpoint of a sport, we're doing a sport. To me, when you look at like every other sport, boxing, and we talked about this with the Mason Fowler podcast, boxing and wrestling both, they started off with essentially endless time, and then they shorten it down. Like wrestling, for any of you guys that maybe aren't familiar, wrestling originally, like in the Olympics, was basically you would just wrestle until you got a pin. And the first Olympics, they had to stop the match because they ran out of daylight. They restarted it the next day, and then they finally got the pin. It was a longer match. And then eventually they started implementing judging criteria. And this is kind of what the Who's Number One does. It says it's like it's a sub only, but that's not really true. It's a sub only with judges, right? So it's like there's still a point system technically, because whether it's 1 point or whatever, I mean, the fact that someone says at some point, I think that guy won, because he did more to win than that person, so therefore he wins, that you've given that person essentially a point, and the other person did not get a point. And so they have a judging criteria, which is a must, because you don't want to have you don't want to do what Metamoris used to do, which was like a no time limit, and it would just go to draw. And then you have all these anticlimactic matches where people just didn't go for anything because it was a draw, right? You get more finishes, and you get more people getting after it. But it's no time limit with a judging criteria. So there's still points available that you don't see the points on a board, right? And so wrestling eventually put in a system like that where you had judges. And then, if my memory serves me correct, during the Cold War, when you have all these different countries and the communist and the capitalist blocks that are kind of pitted up against each other, but we're still having the Olympics, they wanted to have a judging criteria that was not political, where like someone wasn't sitting back and being like, screw that commie bastard, I'm not giving him the win. They wanted to have a clear cut point system, so you could say this person definitively won, or at least, it was a little bit easier to, you're never going to there's always going to be calls that are going to be questionable to some degree, but at least you can say, okay, like there's something going on that we can all agree upon. Right. And so I think that there's things that could be done with the rule system to make point-based tournaments more exciting somewhat, but I don't think that the no time limit sub only is the way to go, to make it a more palatable thing to watch. And again, what I'm talking about now is like, we're not even talking about like casual spectators, because jiu-jitsu really doesn't have pure spectators. Nobody that I know of watches jiu-jitsu matches that doesn't train jiu-jitsu. There's lots of people that watch basketball, they watch football, they watch all these sports, and they don't do it. They know how the game works, but they don't do it. I don't know anybody that says, hey man, I'm watching that Who's Number One match. Do you train? Nah, man, I don't train. I just like watching jiu-jitsu. I don't know anybody that does. So we're talking about people that love doing it, know what's going on, and they still don't want to watch it. So I think that's a problem. And so I think, I think that if you got a sport, you want to make it palatable for the masses. And I don't mean masses as in like random people that don't know anything, but for the people that are involved in your sport. I think that no time limit just simply makes the matches boring. and very hard to watch. And, like just kind of like, whatever.
Mhm.
It doesn't have that nice, like energetic feel to, a shorter match where people are just getting after because they have to.
Yeah, you have a clear ending. Like, this is how far it goes. Now, here's some ideas. I was just thinking as you were talking, like, let's talk about how do we make, if say that's where we're going. We're doing no time limit. How do we make no time limit more exciting? So I've got some ideas. I can share a few and tell me your thoughts. One is, well, these guys, who's number one, they're the kind of the cream of the crop. They're making the most money. So you know what? Say, all right, here's the thing. If you get a submission in 10 minutes, you're going to get this much bonus, right? So give them like a bonus structure possibly. So the longer the match goes, the less incentive on the money. So money could be something, because that's, a lot of times that could definitely help. Like, well, I'm going to go after and see if I can, make an extra $5,000 to whatever it is, right?
And they've done that before.
They have. Okay.
Yeah, like when some of the events, they would give money. I think they did one at the Grand Prix that they had like last year with the Fight to Win, or no, the Who's Number One, where basically you would get there was a pay system, and
but those were not no time limit.
No, but they were like they were shorter matches, but they still gave you an incentive to go for submissions. Now the thing is that back with Metamoris used to do the same thing, but there's a tricky thing where the person would then be left with this choice of like, I can go for the money that I don't have yet, possibly lose because I expose myself, right? Or as long as I don't get beat, it's a draw. So therefore I don't lose anything, And so that's kind of a weird place to be, because if there's a definite win and lose, well, then you're forced to go.
Yeah.
But when you have a situation where there's like, for instance, in Metamoris, you have a win that could gain you some money, but if you lose, you lose, or you can just kind of draw and you can stay right where you are.
Yeah.
And humans can be really bad about this, where like, if we have to expose ourselves in order to gain something that could possibly make us lose something, or we can stay right where we are, complacency's a bitch.
Yeah.
And humans like, I'm good. I'm okay where I'm at right now. Like I'll just stay where I'm at. Yeah. I'll just stay right here. Yeah. And so sometimes they don't go for it. And I think the problem with the money thing is you have that same condition where if you go for the no time limit, because there's money on the time, so you can get more money, but you have to expose yourself. And so but if you expose yourself, you can lose. But if you just, someone's going to win and lose in that situation. But perceptually, it's like, well, there's not an ending. So maybe if I just kind of skirt by, maybe I could do just enough not to lose. And I think having that definitive, like, it's done, you're going to lose if you do not go, it sort of burns they'll say like burn the boats behind you.
Yeah.
You familiar with that story?
No.
So Caesar, Julius Caesar, when he landed during the Roman Civil War, he was getting ready to have his army fight Pompey the Great. And, everybody's kind of like nervous about the whole thing, right? So he burns the boats behind him. He's like, we're not going back. So if you guys want to eat dinner, we got to go eat dinner in their camp. Like, so basically you got to defeat them, because otherwise we're going to get pushed back and you're going to die.
Yep.
You have no choice. And I think that, with competitors, a lot of times, because especially high level guys, this isn't like a hobby. This is their career. This is their livelihood. There's a lot at stake when one of them wins and loses, right? Because a win could put them into a situation where they get more money. They're able to feed their family. They have more security for themselves. A loss could derail that.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot on the line. And so I think you have to put competitors into a place where you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
What other suggestions you got?
All right. I got another one. This one was, so like I was just playing around with the rounds idea. Like if you have a match, like 30 minutes, maybe do rounds, right? Reset.
Yep.
But what about this? So we have no time limit, and like maybe every 10 minutes, whoever's won that portion, could be like how they do, red side wins, blue side wins, whatever. That person gets to pick, and it could be every round you get to pick a more advantageous position. Like, all right, so maybe top half or bottom half or some after the first round. Second round, if you've won that, then maybe you could do mount or back mount or whatever. Like kind of like maybe some of those EBI specific overtime positions. But you can say, all right, so you went after the first 10, 20 minutes, whatever it is. Now this next 10 or 20 minute block, you start in the position you choose because you were deemed the person that kind of won that segment of the match. So that can kind of put positions into play that are going to lead more to victory. Now, again, you're not guaranteed, because if they escape, then all right, well then we're going at it again, or maybe getting back to neutral. So I thought, what do you think about that? Like maybe doing like no time limit, but like maybe intervals, like all right, or like rounds. Like here's 10 to 15 minutes or whatever. You are the aggressor. You went for the submissions. You're deemed the one that's the winner of that segment. So you get to choose. Now say, here we go again. Now we're in the next segment. You start from an advantageous position. You hold that position the whole time. Well, now you get to advance a little more. And so, I mean,
so I think that's a good idea, but I think there's some adjusting because it's like this. So, because I think you're onto something, because this is something I want to test this out.
Let's make our own rule set.
Well, I'm going to do a,
take our ideas, darn it.
I've been talking to one of my guys about this. We're going to try to put together like a little tournament.
Sure.
And I want to test out a rule system where basically there's going to be a period system like wrestling.
Yeah.
So in wrestling, if you're not familiar, like for instance, high school wrestling, you have 3 periods. The first period begins on the feet. What then happens after 2 minutes, the ref will flip a coin, red or green, someone gets to choose. And then you can either choose down position, you can choose up, because basically in wrestling, there's essentially like you're almost, it's kind of not quite the same, very similar to what a turtle position looks like. You're on your hands and your knees. That's position, down. Yeah. And then you can either load up on top of the person or on the bottom of the person. Most often you'll load up on the bottom. You'll choose down first, or actually you can also defer. And most time what you'll do is if you win the coin flip in the second round, you'll defer. So this way you can have the choice in the third. Right? Because you want to be able to make up those points if you need. And if you escape, you get 1 point. And then if not, if you're on top, you've got to hold that person down and try to pin them. Okay. And so you can strategically use that for your advantage. Now, I like that idea because one of the things that a lot of us hate is if someone gets a takedown in like a point-based tournament or gets a sweep, they just stop.
Yep.
They don't do anything, right? That doesn't always happen, but it happens sometimes.
Yeah.
What would be really interesting is, let's say you had some bruiser wrestler taking people down. Wouldn't it be interesting to say, well, he's not submitting anybody, and like in 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever the period system is, the person can choose top or bottom guard. So then that person has to choose, like, so let's say if you got a guy who's on the bottom, he gets taken by this wrestler, he's down by 2 points, period ends. He wins the coin flip. He can say, I want this guy on his back. And then you can see, well, let's see how this wrestler does off his back. It would be interesting. Yep. Now the thing that I think you would have to do is you have to make sure that the positions aren't too juicy. What I mean by this is, like, for instance, EBI. One of my criticisms of EBI, there are a lot of times it's a really good event, and I like it. I like watching them. Right, I've got a UFC Fight Pass, so I can watch some of their stuff. But one of the problems is you'll see where you get 2 really good guys, they don't fully engage because they're saving their energy for the juicy positions. Like, as guaranteed, I can get this guy on his back. I can have this guy in an arm bar. Okay, I'm going to save my energy for that. I'm not going to go, because if I go hard now, I'm going to end up tired, where then I won't have enough energy to finish them. And worse, they'll have more energy to finish me, right, in those positions. So I think that if you make the positions favorable, but not too juicy, like, then you won't think about just saving it. Because in like wrestling, they're not like, you get to like have the person in an almost pinned position or something. It's like, no, you get them down. Like, you got to break them down. And I think being in a situation like that, where you're still in an advantageous position, maybe like a guard or half guard or something to that nature, but it's not so good that you just completely ignore the rest of the match, so that you can just wait for that and you can serve your energy for that. And I think a period system of some sort could be really interesting to see, like, because then you would basically say you're going to end up on your back probably at some point in this match. So you can't be a one-dimensional grappler. Right. You've got to be able to play everywhere, just like in wrestling. You've got to be able to, be able to escape. You've got to be able to break people down for pins, and you got to be able to do takedowns. You can't just be like, I'm really good at takedowns and like working for the person on the pin. You've also got to be good at like escaping and reversing those positions.
Well, I think what you're talking about, with the wrestling specific part of it, is that you actually are kind of enticing movement. You're enticing scrambles. And I think that's where a lot of fun things happen in the scrambles. That's where some submissions happen. I think the scrambles and kind of those, the things that the positions that that kind of create movement, create action. That's kind of what you want to do. Right. So I think, there's some finagling to it. There's some kind of like nuance to it, but EBI tried to combat the stalling in the regular time by saying, if you get a submission, you get money, or like 10,000. And so like you could make it, you could win the whole thing, which could be like 4 matches and really win no money. But the idea was, and we've talked to some people too, the idea was that, well, the notoriety you get from it, the prestigiousness
You'll make more
of
money
that
that way.
tournament,
Yeah.
you're going to make more money with sponsorships
Mhm.
and seminars, and it's going to be some more longevity in that aspect. But I don't know. I think there's a lot. I do feel, as far as like, and maybe this is old school with like the Gracie kind of ideas of jujitsu, it's like that does to me, like there's no way out, like no time limit. Like
Mhm.
it's who can, part of being the best grappler is the one that can, sometimes take the most, like can suffer the most, right? You
Mhm.
can get in some bad positions and you sit there and you take it, and then the other person gets maybe tired from attacking, and then you find your spot to be advantageous and take control. I mean, I don't know, but I think it definitely is, because I think cardio is a huge factor. But again, as far as appealing to people, like even jujitsu,
Even appealing to the competitors.
to the competitive,
Very few competitors are like, I love no time limit matches.
So
Some people do, most don't. Most people will say, like, man, I'd like to kind of shorten it down a little bit, just because, the grueling nature of like what you might be getting into. It's just like it's not something to look forward to. From a standpoint of like your own ability to show what you got. Because again, you're like, well, I'm not going to be able to really go hard in this one because I've got to move at a slow pace. It's like watching a sprint versus a marathon. Like a sprint's a fast paced race. Like a several 100-meter race, whatever. You watch like a marathon, like nobody sits around and watches guys run like a full marathon, 26 miles. Oh, this is great. Like, it's like, no, it's not fun. But you will have but like think of like horse racing. People are glued to horse racing. It's 2 minutes, right? For like the Kentucky Derby, right? It's 2 minutes. Nobody's glued to like a NASCAR race that goes on for hours. I mean,
some people are.
Well, I mean, you have like
watch out, Chewy. We're getting some angry
no,
emails.
you ever been? I have family that watch NASCAR.
I've never.
They don't watch NASCAR like sitting on the edge of their feet the whole time. There's moments where all of a sudden the race is coming down to the wire. Oh, what's going on here? And there's stuff that happens, but they're not glued to their seats for the whole several hours. Or they get up and they do stuff like my family. They've had like little parties and get-togethers for like big NASCAR races. Yeah, and they're watching it on TV, and then they're kind of eating some food, talking to each other, coming back, and there's little stuff that happens from time to time. But it's the same thing with a marathon. Nobody's watching like a running like a 26-point-mile marathon. Like, it was great, like so exciting. It's just
no time limit for a marathon or a race would be just to just run until somebody like dies. Everybody stops running. There's one person left.
Fuck, someone has a heart attack.
Yeah.
And that's another thing too. It's like, I mean, like Felipe Pena, I remember like, people were really talking trash about him, calling him like a weak. And it's weird because I've got people that sent me messages directly.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. That's interesting. Some of this judgment and like you see a lot of it. And Gordon, I think probably feeds into some of it. He kind of promotes it,
because it's getting people to do what he wants them to do. It's basically he's stirring the pot, and people get like they kind of bandwagon up, and so it creates this like us against them mentality. And so people, it's like our herd mentality, where they're like, yeah, like our guy won, and this kind of thing. And so people trash on him.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, you got some messages on your like emails and stuff. Like, what were some of the things you were seeing?
So let's first off understand this. Like, I'm not a super fan of Pena or Gordon. I respect the shit out of both of them as grapplers. They're great 100%. Grapplers. They're both. I mean, Gordon's one of the best no-gi grapplers ever. Pena is one of the best grapplers of his generation, easily. You can say this, right? And so it's like both are amazing grapplers. And I know that like people talk trash and stuff to get people excited for things, right? So I understand that element of it, right? Sure, 100%. And I don't even dislike it. It's part of entertainment. Like, it's especially with Americans, right? Like we got to be spiced up a little bit. So we watch it, right? There's a reason why everybody tuned in to watch the Pena fight. My thing is this. I don't know, like, I have no idea what was said behind closed doors regarding his mental state, regarding whether or not he was going to fight or not, payment, whatever. There's all these different stories going out. My thing that made me laugh is about the jiu-jitsu community, like sometimes with what they do. Because, for instance, like when I got up the next morning to see the fight, to see who won, I was like, let me look on Flow. Oh, okay, let's see here. And I saw on Flow that Pena had won, or had lost, and Gordon won. And I was like, well, I had Gordon winning on my own sort of. Absolutely. In my mind. I was like, I thought he was going to win. So makes sense. And I saw the way that it was kind of a weird, anticlimactic way of finishing it. And then I saw people just trashing Pena, like, what a disgrace. He gave up. And I'm like, like, well, you know, he tapped out, he stopped, he got submitted by verbally tapping. But I'm like, okay, like what, like that happens sometimes, right? We lose. So he gave up verbally. It's like, you don't know what's going on with the guy. Cause here's my thing. I know that for me, like I've been in a rolling session and I've been whatever, and I've had like heart palpitations where all of a sudden my heart's like, and it's like skipping beats, and I fucking feel like I'm having a heart attack.
Mhm.
I'm like, whoa, am I about to kill over? And then like I had to slow down. It was just like dehydration issues, overexerted
Yeah.
myself. And then I've had a situation. I remember my mom when I found I was 2 weeks out from a fight, and I saw people like, you know, making fun of him about this, like, because he was like saying he's really close to Leandro Lowe. When my mom, granted, you know, everything's different, but when my mom, like, I was 2 weeks out from a fight, and when she got diagnosed with terminal cancer, like she was going to die, they were, because like I remember she was doing better, and then they were like, they did a full body scan. It was like, oh, it's spread everywhere. Like, I mean, she's just lit up, and so the doctor was like, she's got like 2 to 6 months, and I was like, okay. I was like, well, I don't really want to fight anymore. I was like, I just want to be with my mom. Like, I don't give a fuck. It's just, that's the way I felt. And so like I called the promoter, and he was like, yeah, no problem, man. It's like, I understand. But then people from the other team that I was supposed to fight, like I saw someone sent me a Facebook message or showed me that you know, they called me a pussy, back out, whatever, scared. You know, okay, I'm a pussy, right? Because I didn't want to fight because I wanted to be with my mom. Happens. So you never know what's going on with people. And I've also dealt with anxiety, which people can't see anxiety. They don't see what it looks like. And it can kick up for all sorts of random reasons, and you don't know what's going on, and you can't see it. It's not something like you can tell someone unless you felt it. I remember one of my good friends who would submit 90%, like 95% of you guys listening to this, he would submit you probably very easily. Very good competitor. And I remember watching one of his matches, a good friend of mine, and he was winning the match. And then he just stops, like in the middle of the match. I'm like, what the hell just happened? And then the person passed his card, got on top of him, and submitted him. He tapped out to pressure. I sent him a message like, bro, what just happened? Are you okay? And he said, bro, he's like, I had like a full blown panic attack in the middle of the match. I've never had that happen before. That was so weird. He was like, it came on. I had a panic attack. I felt like I couldn't breathe. And he was like, I just wanted the guy off me because I just wanted to be able to breathe. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to call that guy a pussy. I don't know what he was going through. And so going back to it, I was like, I get online, I see all this stuff going on. They're all trashing, calling him a pussy and a disgrace and stuff like that. And I remember I clicked on one guy's profile, just like, let's see who these people are. You know, one of them was like a blue belt, and in his profile, it said something like, I'm a humble warrior, you know, or something. It's like, a humble warrior indeed. Right. As you're trashing someone else. And I know this sounds, maybe I just sound like I'm grumpy, but like, I'm all good with people like building up a fight and stuff like that. One of the things that I find incredibly weak is when people will try to kick a competitor when they're down. Especially like you had nothing to do with the match. You couldn't hang with that person if you friggin' wanted to a day in your life. You know, like 100% of the people that were talking trash about Pena,
Yeah.
they can't hang with him.
No.
Like there's only like a couple guys that can hang with him in jiu-jitsu, right? Gordon's one of them, right? The rest of you guys can't touch him. And like you're trying to talk trash about him like he's a wimp or whatever. Like he would kill you, right? Yeah. But there's something about that rubs me the wrong way. I just see it as a very weak thing, because when you really think about it, whenever you down talk someone else, what it really is a cheap ego boost. So basically, so everything that humans do to some degree is about building up our self-esteem, right? Like, why do we do all the things that we do? Like, think about like a lot of the stuff. You build yourself up, you get more money, you get nicer stuff, you get good at jiu-jitsu, you win gold medals. What is that doing? It's building up your self-esteem, your picture, your view of who you are. You're building that, oh, I'm worth something. I'm good at something, right? So when you talk down at someone, it makes you feel good. Oh, yeah. Like you feel good about yourself for a moment. Now it's cheap. It's not worth anything. You didn't do anything, but it's why so many people do it. It's why you see so many people talking nasty about other people, because it's a very cheap, easy way to get like a little boost to your ego, and it feels good, right? And I understand that, right? So again, so the people do that. And you know, a lot of times you see in the jiu-jitsu community, people talk all this about being respectful, being humble, losing your ego, all this stuff, right? And then like they're so quick to like trash someone on social media and things like that. I'm like, oh, okay. Which, check us out. If you're like that, it's completely okay. You know, just be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
So when someone starts trashing you, don't get upset about it. Like this is what like I'm promoting, I am contributing to. So don't be upset when it comes your way.
Right.
Right. Because you're helping it happen. And then I thought, well, maybe this is just the comments, right? Whatever. Well, the night before the match, I had put up a little poll on Instagram. I was like, hey, who do you guys got winning? Right. And they're like, it was like 90% was Gordon, right? I was there with him. I thought Gordon was going to win. And that the day after the fight, like after the match had been settled, people were sending me messages. I eventually took the post down because people were replying to it saying, yeah, man, Pena lost. What a disgrace. How he gave up, whatever. And I'm like, were you in there?
Yeah.
Could you hang with Gordon? Like, no. Like, so it's like, do you know what he's going through? Like, can you get inside of his skin?
Yeah.
Like, it's just one of those things where I think it's just such a weak position to come from. Like, as if like one of the guys that sent me this is like some 40-year-old like friggin' white belt. I'm like, bro, you're a 40-year-old white belt. This is like you just got started in this stuff. What the hell do you know? Like, this is an elite competitor that's dedicated his life to something.
That's accomplished
like
a hell of a lot.
He's accomplished the top. He has literally accomplished the top of the top.
Yes.
And you're some random guy on the internet being an asshole.
Yeah.
It's like you're literally like what most of us. And the thing is maybe this is part of jiu-jitsu becoming a spectator sport, where you start getting your armchair quarterbacks. Well, you get your armchair quarterbacks. You get people, I would have never given up if I was in that match or whatever. That kind of, you wouldn't have made the match, period. Yeah. That's the thing. Yeah. Or you get people talking, like you said, where you have teams, right? Where you look at people who will sort of self-identify with, like in Louisville, for you guys listening, Louisville's a college basketball town. And it's so stupid. Like, you get like around college basketball season, it's like people talk about their college, the teams that they follow, not with a we like, right. No, you didn't do anything, honey. You didn't play on that team there, Buster. You're like a fat middle-aged guy that's watching basketball, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you're not on the team. You never were on the team. You never played basketball. So just cheer your team on and be that.
I think that the trash talking between Pena and Gordon, like, that's their thing. They're involved in that. And like, I'm whatever you decide, like what they do, I'm like, okay. Like, I don't really have, I don't know. I mean, Gordon beat him, and then, so I don't know. Yeah. Like, that's it. But like, they have their own, there's their own situation. And what I think we're specifically talking about is these people that have no idea the inner workings of what's going on in these people's lives, their training camps, their, situations, personally and stuff. And like what Gordon and Pena and all that stuff going on, that's for them. And that's cool. I'm like, Gordon's allowed to say whatever he wants. He shows up, he backs it up. He won, that kind of stuff. And then, so I'm cool with that. It's people that like have really no idea, that, like you said, the armchair quarterbacks have no affiliation, no absolute understanding of what's going on. Now, the one thing that's interesting to me, which I always love, and it's like, it's so funny, like the relationship between John Danaher and Gordon Ryan. Yeah. Because Gordon does this thing, and Danaher doesn't seem to have any kind of like, not even an idea, but like any kind of the way his posts look is totally different. Like Mr. Gordon and Mr. Pena had like this, there's some of the, and I respect that, but I wonder, like, that dynamic's kind of interesting to me, right? Because they approach jiu-jitsu, and Donner has his own unique following for like the methodical and kind of soft-spoken the way he is. They're kind of like a very much an odd couple. But like,
Gordon's a good entertainer.
Gordon is.
He's an entertainer. Yeah, I mean, it's
which is good. That's why, like Conor McGregor, the best fighter, MMA fighter. No,
why did Conor McGregor get paid so much money? Not because. So here's the thing: when you have to think about our society,
you're right about this.
In our society, entertainers are paid the most money. Okay, like just think about like entertainers versus educators. Educators are hands down paid less than entertainers. Right. And so it's like entertainment, and I enjoy it. I like it. He's, they start getting,
I love it too.
They start getting the match going, and like, it gets you invested in. Okay. And then when the fight's, I'm like, okay, cool. Because the people that are talking trash about Pena, they'll be the same people on a dime, they'll flip. And if Gordon loses a match someday, which will probably happen at some point, right? Sure. He'll lose a match to someone, and they'll be so cool. Oh, he was never that good anywhere. They'll be ready to talk trash or something.
Sure.
And to me, like, I'll be like, oh, wow, cool. Well, I mean, best guy, one of the best guys ever. That was impressive. Moving on. Like, for me, I don't know. I think here's my deal with it. And for any of you guys listening, this is my little rant on this. Our lives, you get a finite amount of days, right? Like you're going to die someday. the thing about humans are like, it's a weird thing where we are a creature of nature, but we seem to be, we don't really know because we can't get into their brains, but we seem to be the only creature that knows that it's going to die. It's like this kind of scary thing because, like, animals, they just die. They're like, they're not, it doesn't seem like the deer out there eating the grass going, man, someday this is going to be over and I'm not going to be in this pasture, right? Like they're just eating grass. They're just doing their thing. And then one day they die, right? Yeah. Whereas humans, we go about our lives and we know deep down that this is only temporary and that our lives are so fragile. And like you think of Leandro Lowe, like you could die at any moment. I remember someone asked me that earlier that week, they said, Chewy, what are you afraid of? And I was like, a death that I'm not prepared for. Because it's like, if I get like diagnosed with something and I can mentally get ready for it, put everything into place and be, all right, I'm going to do, this is going to happen, rather than just like one day it's like, boom, car wreck or something. You just don't know. Right. And that's just the reality of life.
It's freaky, man.
It's freaky. And so we have this fragile life. And so you only have a finite amount of days and you don't know when that's going to end. Right. And every day you wake up, you've got a finite amount of energy. You only get so much every single day. Right. And most of us that like do our own sort of work, we know like there's a point where you're tapped out. Like you couldn't possibly work anymore. Right. It just happens some days. And so you get a finite amount of energy. Why spend that energy on anyone else? Like for me, it's like, why spend that energy trying to get a cheap ego boost that isn't worth anything when I could have taken that energy and put it towards improving myself, where I could take that critical lens that I'm viewing someone else's life from and saying like, how could I improve? What could I do better? What kind of struggles and obstacles do I need to overcome? Because we all got them. We all have different ones we all got to overcome. What can I do to grow stronger, to be better, to improve at what I'm doing? And so that's my deal with it. Like it's one of these things where jiu-jitsu is supposed to help you gain that perspective, like that, like you put the burden on yourself and you improve yourself, and that everybody's going to lose someday and whatever else. And it just is what it is. But instead you're having this thing where it's like people are just, they eating it up. And again, it's a masterful job by Gordon as an entertainer, right? It's like he's basically created these little teams and stuff like that. Same thing for Pena. They're both got their little teams. Sure, they're both talking trash about each other. And so you got these teams and these people are just squabbling because they get so self-identified. My thing is again, avoid that herd mentality, right? Enjoy the match, enjoy it, but don't get sucked up into that stuff. Because then, like, you see these threads where people are going back and forth for hours with each other. They literally wasted hours of their life fighting for people that they don't even know. Mm-hmm. People they've never met, people they never meet. It's like, so why not just say, I'm going to enjoy this whole entertaining spectacle, and then I'm going to get back to my life. Yeah. And to me, it's like, it's one of those things where, if you're going to be one of those people that's going to run around talking about jiu-jitsu lifestyle and promoting good manners and behaviors and stuff like that. And again, plenty of competitors are guilty of this, right? Own it, like, whatever, just, be that person. But now if you're one of those people that does like talking shit, just own that too. Yeah. If that's who you're going to be, just own it, but don't like come around and talk about respect and all that bullshit. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just because it's just not.
Yeah. And I think like there's unique situations and Gordon, like he likes to talk trash, but he's also respectful. Like he usually shakes people's hand, like that's it. Like he's got a persona, right? You walk around like putting a fake crown or like a crown, gesturing a crown on your head. You want that, but I think he may be doing it just as much for himself as he is for everyone else, right? Because maybe putting that pressure on himself is what keeps him kind of motivated, makes him keeps him sharp.
Sure.
So who knows? Who knows, right?
Put himself under the gun to perform.
Yeah, and you have to. But like, I think the one point you talked about, in arguing online and stuff like that, I think once you realize that you're never going to change somebody's mind like that by attacking them, more like listening. And this is not like a conducive, people are just trying to,
of course,
shout out for their team kind of thing. But like when you realize like, whether it's politics or whatever, like you're never going to like, well, tell me why. Like, that's one thing I learned from you, right? Like you were like, well, I always ask questions. And I was like, and I took that to heart. And I'm like, always like, I try to always, I won't say I always do it. Sometimes I get emotionally invested in stuff. Sure. But I'm like, man, so why do you think that is? Like without having any kind of emotion, like, well, help me understand this. And I think when you come from a questioning perspective, somebody gets their guard down and it allows like actually some positive or some useful conversation. Yeah,
something that you can cover some ground.
You can. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that, for what it is, I think it was cool. It was cool to see the match, everything the way it played out. I think that adds a different interest. They could, it could say, well, you never submitted me, really, I kind of, was done. Like that was just the time limit that we agreed
Sure.
upon, whatever, who knows. But it does lead to, for me, it was a competitive, going back to it, it was a competitive match.
More competitive. I think more competitive than what anybody thought it was going to be.
Gordon was winning, but he didn't like blow him out of the water. Like,
Right. It wasn't like
he,
leading up to the fight. Gordon was like, he will have no offense. I'm going to smash him. Like,
not like that, man. They went
Yes.
back and forth. They
Good.
smacked each other a little bit.
Yeah, there's some smacks.
There was,
yeah.
and I think there was some anger there.
Sure,
and,
sure. There's definitely some animosity there.
But I think all things considered, we'll get some more down the line. I think they did. It was a good match. Honestly, could have been shorter, obviously, but
yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting if those two end up facing each other at the September Abu Dhabi.
And I think that's what means. So I think for me that's what means something.
Yeah,
that will mean something.
Yeah, I mean it's like, it all means something, but I think the ADCC would be interesting. It would be interesting to see if they face off against each other. What does that match look like in like 15 to 20 whatever minutes?
They've had first time in about 5 years that they ever actually get to feel the other person's strength, their movement.
Yeah, because Gordon's grown a lot in those 5 years.
100%.
He's grown a ton. And we haven't really seen a ton of Felipe. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So but yeah, anyway, guys, that's the podcast, a little short rant there at the end. And again,
we always get into some good stuff, dude. Like just some meaningful conversation. I know we talk about this a little bit of superficial, like trash talk and stuff, but like that can always, I think we get somewhere important. So hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you got something. Maybe you won't argue with people on social media.
I mean,
maybe you still will. I don't know. Maybe you'll be better at it.
Yeah, maybe. But guys, hopefully you enjoyed the podcast today. Again, as always, guys, if you want to support the podcast, you can check out Charlotte's Web CBD company. They make a premium product, fantastic product. It's part of my recovery routine. I use it every night before I go to bed. I have a noticeable difference from it as far as my recovery from training goes. And so check it out and see what it does for you. Again, if you want to go to their website and get a 20% discount, you can do so by going to charlottesweb.com. Promo code is Jiu-Jitsu20. Save 20% off the order. It's a great deal. Try it out for a month, see what you think. Also, if you are in the market for some new gear, t-shirts, apparel related to Jiu-Jitsu, check out epicrollbjj.com. Use the promo code Jiu-Jitsu for 15% off. And again, that's our buddy Matt. He does great work there. I love all his stuff. I wear it all the time. You'll see me in videos and stuff like that. And I don't wear it because like I'm trying to promote his stuff. I mean, I don't mind it, but I just like wearing it because it's cool. It's nice gear that I actually like wearing, so I wear it. And guys, if you want to support the podcast directly, do so by going to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. Inside, we have content from every single one of the guests that we've ever had, giving a actionable or strategic tactical tip that you can implement into your jiu-jitsu game. We also have some content exclusive that's just Eugene and I talking out different ideas. And again, if you're someone that likes the podcast, if you enjoy it and you wish there was more of it, there is more of it. It's on the Patreon, and you can go to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast and get access to it and check it out. Also, guys, if you want to get my daily email newsletter and join the others that are getting it every single day, a lot of the ideas that you hear in the podcast start there and they get kind of expanded on in the podcast. You can also get exclusive deals and discounts to all my products. Again, I do that exclusively in the email, almost exclusively. Every now and then it makes its way up, but almost exclusively in the email. And then if upon joining, you get 3 free jiu-jitsu ebooks. One's on game plan, one's on studying at home and doing some ideas for jiu-jitsu at home, which I'm probably going to take off at some point. And then one is on drilling for jiu-jitsu. And you get access to all 3. Get my daily email newsletter by going to my website at jiujitsu.net/join, join, and you can get access to all that stuff.
And follow us on the old social media.
Follow us on social media. So
Instagram, we have a website. We have a t-shirt on that website, a podcast t-shirt actually still available. Yeah. And then if you want to see the video, which you're seeing right now, youtube.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast.
Yep. And if you guys do end up going to the ADCC championships, Eugene and I will be there. So feel free to say hey. If you see us, we'll probably have a vlog or something like that going on. So feel free to say hey to us. And that's that. So guys, hopefully you enjoyed the podcast, and we'll see you next time.